As the IDF retaliates with strikes across the Gaza Strip after militants killed 2 Israeli soldiers in Rafah, the question becomes, is Hamas regrouping? Well, IDF Major Elliot Chodoff joins us now. So, Elliot, let's get right after it. Are they regrouping?
Absolutely. They started regrouping the minute the ceasefire went into effect. Not surprising. It was predictable and predicted along the same lines that Hezbollah began its regrouping when that agreement went into effect. These organizations are not rolling over and playing dead. And by the way, we don't need to guess about it. Their leadership is saying it outright. The based Qatar-based leadership made a number of statements over the last few days. No, we're not putting down our weapons. No, we're not relinquishing control of Gaza. And all we're really looking for is a 3 to 5 year ceasefire so we can rebuild everything and do it all over again.
Well, that seems like a direct conflict with the ceasefire agreement. Obviously the hope would be that Hamas would lay down their offensive weapons, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So take us to the ground right now in Gaza. What's happening currently with IDF movements, but more specifically, what is Hamas trying to do right now?
Okay, so first of all, let me start with the IDF because it's much simpler. We retaliated yesterday. As you mentioned, 2 soldiers were killed, a number were seriously injured. Others were attacked and fought off the attack. In other words, the number of casualties was relatively low. 2 killed is not a low, but compared to what could have been, because the Israeli troops fought off attacks in other places and they just didn't make it into the news. But all of that ended under direction of the U.S. government. So the Israeli retaliation is over for the moment. Hamas is doing a number of things. First of all, the first thing they did was get back on the ground. They appointed directors and governors in the areas under their control, which is about 50% of the Gaza Strip. They started rounding up and torturing and killing opponents, real and imagined. Uh, I saw somewhere, yeah, they held trials, 3-second long trials. Hi, you're guilty. Bang. Uh, so most of what they're doing on that level is reestablishing themselves as the thugs that they are amongst the population. And I think that here it's important to interject something that I've said. I may have said it on your show as well. Hamas actually has 3 levels of power. The highest level was their organized military power, which was largely dismantled by the IDF in the 2 years since October 7th. There was a middle level of guerrilla warfare, which was reduced, but is still out there. In other words, their guerrilla capabilities. And that's what we saw yesterday in the attacks on IDF troops. And by the way, attacks are taking place every day. Yesterday, they managed to kill soldiers, but it's happening every day. It happened again today as well. The third level, what I would call the lowest level in terms of intensity, is their thug capability, which is how they impose themselves on the population in Gaza. And that's virtually impossible to dismantle from the outside. These are the gangs of guys going around with AK-47s who don't have heavy weapons. Mostly what they have is brutality, and we've seen the clips of it. So that was the first thing they did. The next thing that yes.
No, go ahead if you have some more to say.
No, the next thing they're doing is trying to rebuild their other capabilities. Not the military yet, but beef up their guerrilla capabilities. One of the things they're doing at the moment, for example, is combing Gaza for unexploded munitions so that they can harvest the explosives and turn them into IEDs and booby traps.
Obviously there's such a mix of emotions. Last week when we saw the 20 Israeli hostages return home, I mean, I was just crying watching some of these reels, some of these reunions after 738 days.
Right.
But the juxtaposition of a week later where it's like, wait a second, pessimistically or maybe just realistically, was this just another kick the can down the road moment where we're going to have another flare up between the IDF and Hamas 5 years from now? Like, is it same old, Elliot?
It is absolutely same old, same old. And here again, as we're seeing in Lebanon, there are many parallels. There's critical differences. From day one in Lebanon with the agreement, we said zero tolerance. There's an agreement that Hezbollah will not move back into South Lebanon. There's an agreement they will not rebuild certain military capabilities. They started violating that agreement before it went into effect. And our attitude has been we will strike at all violations of the agreement. And by the way, there were heavy strikes today. They haven't been reported. I happen to know about them because I live up north and I heard the planes going in overhead. But that's a daily occurrence. We're not stopping them, but we're not letting them do it easily. And that was the idea yesterday when the two soldiers were killed. The idea was we're not going to tit for tat this. You violated, this is a gross violation of the agreement. As far as we're concerned, all bets are off. And the United States, for its own reasons, and in my opinion, mistakenly, stepped in and put an end to it and basically let Hamas understand that they can manipulate their way around this. And that'll give us another day or two of quiet, but in the long run, it's teaching Hamas that they can manipulate the system. And that's never a good thing.
Well, obviously, Elliot, as a member of the IDF and Israeli, you're going to have your perspective. And I just out of curiosity, because I think it's such an interesting perspective. If you could talk to the president of the United States and say, "Hey, here's what, with all due respect, here's what you're missing," what would you tell him?
Read the Hamas charter. Their purpose of existence, their raison d'etre, as it's called, is written in the charter: to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews in the world. That's what they live for. Now, if you think you can negotiate that away, more power to you. But that's just not realistic. This is an ideology that Westerners have a very hard time internalizing, and I can understand why. We, as Westerners, tend to think there's got a way to make a deal with these guys. There's got to be something they want that they can compromise on. But we should also know uh, whether from our own religious beliefs or from our own political beliefs, there are the things we just don't compromise, and they're not the same. And I don't want to be misunderstood in drawing content parallels, but there's a certain structural parallel. I had this discussion with somebody earlier today. It's not about money. Witkoff and Kushner thinks you can make a deal, but it's not about money. There are things that are more important than money. And I put this, to you and to listeners. Would you sell out your family for money? Would you sell out your country for money? Would you sell out your religious beliefs for money? And my guess is for most of us, I know for me, the answer is absolutely not. So those things are more important. And for these people, equally so, except that they're religious fanatics, murderers, rapists, kidnappers. Uh, and there's nothing to negotiate with there, just as there was nothing to negotiate with the Nazis.
Well, Elliot, to say that you are versed in all things military and strategy would be an understatement. I mean, you've obviously even written certain curriculum about this stuff. So maybe in closing, let me ask you this. You are painting let's just call a spade, a kind of pessimistic view of the reality. Maybe it's just a realistic view. This is what Hamas stands for. They are regrouping. We're kicking the can down the road. So I guess if you were, in charge and the guy upstairs, how would you actually solve this?
You can't solve it from the outside. What I would do is make sure that their rebuilding and reorganizing is as difficult and complicated as it can be made to be. And in other words, zero tolerance. And wherever you see that you have failed in that, you go in and destroy it. Okay, so to be clear, you don't let them build another rocket manufacturing plant, but if you find out 3 months from now that they managed to do it without you knowing about it, you don't just make a note of it. You destroy it. You set them back again. And it's not nice and it's not comfortable, but it's a lot better than seeing October 7th happen again.
Well, Elliot, I appreciate your invaluable insight. I know it's late in Israel. God bless, my friend.
Thank you. You too.